Our prelude was by the Mel Powell Septet, featuring the piano genius Mel Powell playing his own composition, Cooch. Welcome to the third Wednesday worship service of the Unitarian Universalist Multiracial Unity Action Council, an organization that usually shortens its name to UUMUAC, and usually shortens that by pronouncing it UUMUAC, and shortens that sometimes by pronouncing that or saying the MAC. But anyway, I'm Richard Trudeau. I'm a semi-retired UU minister living in Massachusetts. Our preacher this evening is the Reverend Ken Phifer, and his sermon is called My Sermon, If I Had Only One Sermon to Preach. And I have an announcement, I think, to make. Let's see here. Yes, our next service will be the third Wednesday in October, and the preacher will be the Reverend Craig Morrow, and his sermon is called Heads Up. If you got the Zoom link tonight from this email address, you'll continue to get Zoom links every month unless you opt out. But if the Zoom link you have was forwarded to you by someone else, perhaps the administrator in a church office or someone like that, you may not receive the Zoom link in the future unless you ask for it. And the way to ask for it is just to send an email to that address, and you don't need to wait till October. You can do it tomorrow. Richard, the numeral 3, the word point, @gmail.com. And here's Ken. Ken, you're muted. Ken, you're muted.
How am I now?
Good.
Okay. I wanted to greet Wes, first of all, with the first Russian word I learned at the Army Language School in Monterey, California, back in 1961. And that word is Здравствуйте. And I'm sure you know what that is. So we'll go on from there to the opening words that I used in every opening service, every fall, the first service of the church year, because I found them so appropriate. And they're a little bit off for online stuff, but I think the spirit of them you will understand. They're Ken Patton's words. We arrive out of many singular rooms, walking over the branching streets. We come to be assured that our brothers and sisters surround us, to restore their images upon our eyes. We enlarge our voices in common speaking and singing. We try again that solitude found in the midst of those who with us seek their hidden reckonings. Our eyes reclaim the remembered faces, and their voices stir the surrounding air. The warmth of their hands assures us, and the gladness of our spoken names. This is the reason of cities, of homes, of assemblies in the houses of worship. It is good to be with one another. I'm going to light the chalice. The chalice that I'm lighting is a chalice made for me by a man who lives in Georgia, a retired English professor, but he does candles and does painting and all kinds of artistic things. And it just seemed to me so appropriate because he and I have done a lot of things together, and he is such a kind and generous man. And I have to say that the thing that we did together that we are most proud of is we climbed, and he was 87 and I was 81, Mount Kennesaw, if you know Kennesaw Mountain in Georgia, that we climbed that mountain. We left all those couples who were climbing up there with their babies in the dust as we moved. Come on, baby. There you go. Mm-hmm. May the light that we now kindle inspire us to use our powers to heal, and not to harm, to help and not to hinder, to bless and not to curse, to serve you, Spirit of freedom.
Can you hold it up so we can see it?
I can sure try. It's quite a candle.
Oh, wow. Yes. Oh, wow. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. It is the mission of the Unitarian Universalist Multiracial Unity Action Council to carry out and foster anti-racist and multiracial unity activities, both within and outside the Unitarian Universalist Association, through education, bearing witness and other actions, and expansion of our membership, both within and outside the walls of our congregations. We also seek to defend our UU principles against those who seek to undermine them. We envision our congregations, denomination, and society as not being colorblind, but color appreciative, as judging and treating members of the world's rank and file by the content of their character, not the color of their skin or their cultural heritage, and as treasuring diversity in the context of the beloved community. We call this vision multiracial Unitarian Universalism. This is our goal. This is what's on top of the mountain. This is the prize we try to keep our eyes on: the unity of light and dark-skinned people of the world. What we are about in a single sentence is we want to promote multiracial unity in the context of the 7 principles of the Unitarian Universalist Association.
I'd like to invite you all into a time of meditation, a time of inward reflection, a time, as it were, of prayer. We often forget that life is lived just one day at a time. We so easily let our minds race ahead, filled with anxiety and worry. Will I be able to do tomorrow's work and the next day's and the work of the day after that? Will I ever be the person I want to be? Will I ever do good in the world? Will I get a job when I graduate? Will I be able to find someone to love who loves me? What will I do if I lose my sight or my hearing? We needlessly plague ourselves with the cares of the future, real and imagined, when all we ever really can do is to live today as well as we are able. I think Robert Louis Stevenson had it right. He wrote words that I saw under the desk glass on my father's desk table, and I copied them down, and I've kept them with me ever since then. And that was some 60 years ago. Stevenson wrote, "Anyone can carry his burden, however hard, until nightfall. Anyone can do her work, however hard, for one day. Anyone can live sweetly, patiently, lovingly, purely, till the sun goes down. Living daily. This is really what life means."
Please stay muted because of the limitations of the Zoom technology, but my voice isn't great, but I can carry a tune. If you sing loud, you can drown me out. Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me. Come sing
a song with me that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come dream a dream with me. Come dream a dream with me. Come dream a dream with me that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you home when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come share a rose with me. Come share a rose with me. Come share a rose with me that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you home when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time.
Thank you, Richard. It is a truism among those of us who have chosen homiletics, that is preaching, as our field of expertise, that we each have only one sermon in us. Since our work requires that we deliver far more than just one sermon, and preaching the same sermon every week would likely clear the pews or the chairs very quickly, we have to learn how to ring the changes on our one message so that we can indeed mount the pulpit week by week and remain at least minimally interesting. In that regard, all of us who preach would do well to remember the biting words of Anthony Trollope in his novel Barchester Towers. There is, he wrote, perhaps no greater hardship on mankind in civilized and free countries than the necessity of listening to sermons. No one but a preaching clergyman has in these realms the power of compelling an audience to sit silent and be tormented. Now, I, of course, and I think this is true of all of us preachers, we do not have any power whatsoever to make you sit silent and be tormented. Indeed, it is one of the great strengths, I think, of our Unitarian Universalist religion that people participate according to their free will and not to some notion of eternal suffering if they don't do what they're supposed to do. UUs don't sit in silent torment. They leave. As during a section of a sermon I was delivering, some 15 to 20 people, one by one and two by two, all got up and left. I didn't have a clue as to what it was, but I determined from that point on, I would never again preach on money. I found out at the coffee hour that I had not been told that a particular religious education class, I believe it was the 6th grade, had asked all the parents to leave the service at some particular point so that they could come and watch a special presentation of their children in the 6th grade class. I did request of the religious education director that I be informed ahead of time rather than to discover this in the actual working of it. So I think that they left because they were good parents, not because they didn't like what I said. I think. Now, some people will stay physically, but they will leave mentally. They will be preparing grocery lists or ruminating on a problem at work, or perhaps admiring some fine specimen across the way. Albert Shanker once noted that people generally will listen to the first 10 minutes of any presentation. And then for the next 10 minutes, they will very likely just doze. After that, he remarked, people begin to have sexual fantasies. That's the reason why I always preached more than 20 minutes, to be sure that everybody got at least something out of those minutes of sitting there and listening to the sermon. Now, whatever congregants may do, preachers, unless they are genuinely unself-conscious, preachers preach their one sermon in different ways, using different words, with different emphases, expanding and contracting and amending and finding better phrases to express their one message. Like a jazz musician who has played the same basic tune hundreds and hundreds of times. Think of how many times Coleman Hawkins must have been asked to play Body and Soul. Think of how many times Art Tatum was asked to play anything and never the same way in his remarkable style. Preachers like that, we want to keep the message fresh and interesting, comforting and inspiring, challenging and caring, seeking always better ways to state the message. The work of the preacher is not unlike that of the singer in a story told by Saul Bellow. She was a very young singer, and she was making her debut at La Scala. After a particularly difficult, beautiful aria, the applause was thunderous. Then there were cries for her, do it again, encore, encore. After the fourth such encore, worn out from the challenging music that she'd had to sing over and over and over again, she asked her audience, how many times must she sing it? And a voice cried out, until you get it right. Each week, we preachers do hope that we will get it right, or at least get it close to right, or closer than before. We know that we will likely fail, but we do not share the philosophy of the man who said, if at first you don't succeed, quit. Now, let me try this morning to get it a little bit right this morning. Good God. It's so much fun being old. You don't even know what time of day it is. I realize now it's not 8:30 a.m., it's 8:30 p.m., and this is the evening. So let me try this evening to get it a little bit right, placing before you three themes that are at the heart of my faith. And I believe these themes are also at the heart of the Unitarian Universalist heritage and the religion itself. They form the core of my one sermon. The first theme is history. I majored in history in college because I saw history as an academic discipline within which I could study virtually anything. My doctoral work in Christian anti-Semitism continued this interest in the historical as the human arena in which all subjects could be studied. As I began the process of moving into Unitarian Universalism, one of the most attractive features of the movement was its attitude toward history. In UU understanding, as I perceive it, history or human experience is where we find authority for our theologies and our moral values. UUs see past, present, and future linked together without thinking that one part of history is more important than another. All three matter. All are intertwined, and each affects the other. What we know and think about the past helps us to live in the present and to plan for the future. How we live in the present helps us to redeem the past and to shape the future. How we dream of and work for the future helps us to live meaningfully today and to be accepting of the past. Now, this is in contrast to what we might call the orthodox understanding of history, where some person or some event or revelation in the past is dominating and determinative. The orthodox believer says that all the truth that matters is in the past. This rigid commitment to the past is why it was only a mere 30 years ago that the Roman Catholic Church finally agreed that evolution was not just a sound theory, but a sound theory that really should be thought of as a fact itself. Now, the creationists haven't gotten there yet. They're still hooked on something that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Or consider the power of the violent right-wing Islamic believers who are able to justify murder in their own minds because they think that the critical truths of life took place in the 7th century. Now, the radical is at the opposite extreme. The radical says that the most important moment is yet to be. Despise the wicked past, leave the evil present, and look only to the glorious future. That, it seems to be, is the message of the radical. The 20th century saw the coming to power of various totalitarian governments, governments who blithely murdered millions of people in order to usher in that glorious future, ignoring present-day evils and their own wickedness in the process. Christopher Breese, who is a UU minister or he was in Knoxville, Tennessee. I don't know where he is now. He may still be there. But when he was writing this particular piece that I'm going to talk about, he was in Knoxville, and I think he captured the spirit of the UU approach to history when he wrote of bowling as a spiritual discipline. You bowl a ball too far to the right, and you end up in the gutter of orthodoxy. You're trapped in the past. You bowl a ball too far to the left, and you end up in the gutter of radicalism, pretending that there's a better life in a never-to-arrive future. To knock down the pins, what you have to do is to bowl the ball sort of down the center. You have to strive to get in the middle. Didn't the Buddha teach us this? That wisdom is found in the middle way, between the extremes that can seem so tempting. Aristotle called it the golden mean. I think UUs respect the past, knowing in what measure it affects our lives. Our general genetic inheritance, the social history of our species, as well as the history of our family, and the environmental developments of the ages that have produced our present Earth, all have significance for us. Historian Donald Kagan says that writers of history, and I'm quoting him, have the responsibility of preserving the great, important, and instructive actions of human beings. By knowing what has happened, we can see what good and evil are, what actions help human beings, what actions harm us. History shows us clearly the wickedness of slavery and the oppression of women, the folly of war, and of designing societies that are unjust so that a few get rich and the many live in misery. Hitler and Stalin were clearly evil, and they did monstrously evil things. Clara Barton, Sophia Lyon-Fowles, they were good people, and they did wonderfully good things. It seems to me that our moral values emerge out of seeing what actions and systems do good and what actions and systems hurt people. They're the way that we have to create a vision of what might be and begin working to realize it. We understand, I believe, the truth of Reinhold Niebuhr's words, that nothing worth doing is completed in our lifetime. Worthy goals are not easily accomplished. The time to start working on them then is right now, with however many minor steps are involved. We must do what we can, even if we are not around to see the completion of the task. We must trust that others will carry on the work to make real the vision of a peaceable and just community. History, it seems to me, is about two fundamental things. It's about remembering, and it's about dreaming. We remember so that we can overcome the mistakes of the past and carry forward the noblest visions of humanity. And we dream so that we will never become complacent about who and what we are, always striving to be better and to help the world to be better. The importance of history is the first theme of my sermon. The second is humility. I can already see you, what's he going to talk about humility for? That's an impossible virtue. How on earth can we ever know if we're properly humble? If I go on a diet, I've got something to measure how well I'm doing. I'm losing weight, I'm not losing weight. How many times do I have to research to find out, well, if I eat pecan pie 3 times a day, I'm going to gain weight? Now, I would love to eat pecan pie 3 times a day, but I resist that because I know that's not good. But how can I tell if I'm improving in humility? How do I know if my humble demeanor or yours is not really a mask for vanity and arrogance? Truthfully, I have never thought of myself as a particularly humble person, but I'm not sure if that means that I am or that I am not humble. I just don't know, and I don't know how to find out. Despite the difficulties, I am persuaded that humility is a great virtue. I like what Max Ehrmann said about humility in Desiderata. He didn't use the word, but it's what he was talking about. If you compare yourself with others, you may become vain and bitter. For always there will be greater and lesser persons than yourself. I think that is excellent advice for staying the course, the middle way. But it's really as hard as the dickens to do. Most of us at one time or another do compare ourselves with others and find ourselves either completely wanting or wallowing in self-admiration. Ehrman was right to caution against it. The trick, perhaps, is to try to appreciate ourselves and to respect others and just enjoy life. I think there's several things that can be helpful in doing this. First, who is not humbled by an awareness of the vastness of the universe, the huge universe in which we live? Hundreds of billions of stars in our galaxy and hundreds of billions of galaxies in the universe. Boy, are we nothing compared to that. That is just a hugeness that we can't even take in. We have to use mathematics to understand it. We're just a tiny, minuscule little thing. And speaking of which, let's go the other direction, go down to the fundamental elements. And 20 years ago, I was reading a book by a physicist who said that there were 64 elemental particles that they knew of. 64. And I'm sure that we've got 64 more since that time. There's a vastness in time as well as in physical matter. Billions and billions of years of time that the Earth has been around, billions and billions of years since the universe started, and no one knows what came before that point of singularity. How could anybody be uppity in the face of that knowledge? The Earth and its various life forms are also amazing. I read somewhere that beetles seem to be the most prolific life form. I find this statistic absolutely unbelievable, but this is what a scientist said, that there are 400,000 species of beetles on the Earth. Or consider cockroaches. They can survive even a nuclear war, which obviously we could not do. Or giraffes, hippopotamuses, duck-billed platypuses, monkey pod trees, roses and thorns, mountains, water, the human being. Life is strange and beautiful, and it's full of mystery, and it long predates our brief interlude as part of it. And one last element of humility is the limits that constrain us. Obviously, the first and the most painful of these limits is our mortality. Religions may propose faith commitments about living beyond this life, but there is not one scrap of evidence that we do. Even if we survive for another go-round, and I would welcome that, as I think most people would, that does not make this life any easier. Here's the truth about our mortality. Told in 2 statements that Webster thought up in the heyday of the God is Dead movement of the 1960s. First came these words, God is dead, Nietzsche. And then these words, Nietzsche is dead, God. Whatever we consider the ultimate force of the universe to be, whatever our God is, it will long outlast our very short existence. The limits as well in what we can do. Like it or not, no matter how hard I might apply myself, I will never be able to play the piano as well as Fats Waller or Van Cliburn. For that matter, I can't even play as well as Fats Cliburn or Van Waller. Very few are those who are gifted in all aspects of life. Some of us can cook, and some of us should not go near the kitchen. Some of us are comfortable and capable with technology. Some of us are not. Some of us are good with numbers, and others of us are not. Some of us can hit a curveball, and other folks can't do that. Nobody does everything well. Nobody. Humility is an attitude firmly rooted in the reality of our situation. We're an infinitesimal part of life in a vast space-time universe in which our mortal days are few and our talents limited. Accepting our real condition, I think, frees us to enjoy life, to appreciate what we have and what we can do, rather than long for what we do not have or cannot do. I think it helps us to respect others, to realize they're pretty much in the same boat as we are, and to take delight in their accomplishments. I believe that in the UU heritage, I'm not so sure it's there now, but in the UU heritage, humility is part of the reason that we don't have any binding dogma. There are no required creeds to believe. There are no rituals that one must perform on pain of eternal loss. Humility teaches us that no one of us has the truth. No individual, no religion. At best, each of us has maybe a little bit of the truth. And sharing humbly is the way that we can enlarge our understanding and our grasp of the truth. Humility, it seems to me, is the reason we celebrate diversity. So humility is the second theme of my sermon. And the third is learning how to distinguish between that which is of enduring value and that which is of only passing worth. One of the watershed moments in UU history was the occasion of the installation of the Reverend Charles C. Shackford on May 19, 1841. At that ceremony, Theodore Parker preached a sermon called "The Transient and the Permanent in Christianity." Parker made the point that the authority of Christianity, or of any religion, rests on the truth of its words, not on who said the words, not on any doctrine of the faith. Doctrines, he said, are transient. So are rituals. So are people. The permanent is found in love and morality and divine living, acting on the goodness that is part of every one of us. Parker said that what is demanded of us, and I quote him, is a divine life, doing the best thing in the best way from the highest motives. He went on to note that living in this way does not demand, and I quote him again, demand that all men and women think alike, but that we think uprightly and get as near as possible to truth. Not that all men and women must live alike, but we must live wholly and get as near as possible to a life that is perfectly divine. There are many ways of speaking the wisdom in Parker's words. I think that wisdom is found in the words of the prophet Micah. And he declared that what is required of us is not rituals or sacrifice properly performed or doctrines correctly stated and believed. What is required of us is that we do justice and love kindness and walk humbly with our God. Jesus taught us to love not just family and friends, those who agree with us, but that we should also strive to love our enemies. The Quran instructs us in the many ways that Allah's voice can be heard. Different voices in different places at different times. The permanent is about love and morality. It's not about transient things like wealth or power or fame or comfort. We live in an age that I think celebrates the transient. There was a cartoon in a New Yorker a few years ago that showed a man being held up on the street and the robber saying to him, hand over your most recently acquired technology. In other words, the technology goes by so fast you can't even keep up with it, even if you are a robber. It's all exciting, isn't it? And it's lucrative for those who create these things and sell them to us. But it's all very temporary. What religions are supposed to do, it seems to me, is to remind us of what we need, remind us of the things that endure, the things that really matter, like love and morality, like justice and compassion, like laughter and learning, like sharing and hope, like respect and thoughtfulness. What the UU religion says is that these things can be found everywhere in life, not just in the teachings of a religion. At the 2005 commencement of my alma mater, the actor John Lithgow, who was a member of the class of 1967, spoke of what he had learned from some of the recipients of the Harvard Arts Medal, which he had founded. It was awarded each year at the Springtime Arts First Festival. I began to see, he said, that many of the qualities that made them great artists were the same qualities that made them good people. He then referred to folk singer Pete Seeger, who spearheaded efforts to clean up the Hudson River. He referred to the blues guitarist and singer Bonnie Raitt, who donated funds for guitar lessons for inner city kids. And he talked about the filmmaker Myra Nair, who started a film school in Uganda. He briefly suggested 4 qualities that these and others who have contributed to the welfare of humanity have. He urged his audience, he urged us all, to be creative, to be useful, to be practical, and to be generous. To be creative, to be useful, to be practical, and to be generous. That is wisdom that I think fits any age. That's a truth that endures. And so is the kind of celebration of life that the poet Mary Oliver expresses in her poems, like this one. Some things, say the wise ones who know everything, are not living. I say, you live your life your way and leave me alone. I have talked with faint clouds in the sky when they are afraid of being left behind. I have said, hurry, hurry. And they have said, thank you, we are hurrying. About cows and starfish and roses, there is no argument. They die, after all. But water is a question. So many living things in it. But what is it in itself? Living or not? Oh, gleaming generosity, how can they write you out? As I think this, I am sitting on the sand beside the harbor. I'm holding in my hand small pieces of granite, pyrite, schist, each one just now so thoroughly asleep. See the sacredness in every part of life. To really live the truth of being part of the interdependent web of all existence is to be in tune with the universe, with that which goes on, with that which endures. So hold fast to love and morality and life, to that which endures. Be creative, be useful, be practical, and be generous. I think we live best when we live consciously in history, when we live with humility, and when we live with permanent values, not transient ones. And I believe that this is the central message of the Unitarian Universalist heritage. When we live it, we make the world a better place, and we make ourselves better people. That is my faith. That is my sermon.
Thank you. We hope you'll think about who we are. We hope you'll check out our website and see the Unitarian Universalist Multiracial Unity Action Council is about. We hope you'll look at some issues of our frequent magazine, the Mac Arrow. We exist to promote multiracial unity. You might say, and to do it in the context of the 7 principles of the Unitarian Universalist Association. And you might say, well, I don't understand why you exist. Doesn't the UUA, isn't it promoting those things? And well, unfortunately, we think not. We think that at least a majority of the national officials of the UUA and the UU Ministers Association, and for that matter, our 2 seminaries, are embarking on a racism fighting path that we think in a subtle way, but an important way, is actually racist itself. It seems to treat people of color and in general, and Black people in particular, not as warriors or survivors, but as victims who are just helpless to succeed without special assistance. It treats people of color and Black people in particular as children, we think. And of course, if that were the only problem, we still wouldn't need to exist, because we could argue vigorously with the UU national officials who have these positions, but they won't let us. These same national officials are pursuing this anti-racism path in an authoritarian way. They're no longer a letters column, in UU World. And 2 years ago, the editor said there's only going to be one anti-racist approach publicized in the future in UU World, and ministers have been disfellowshipped and have been censured. This authoritarianism seems in contradiction with the most fundamental of Unitarian Universalist values, which is free thought. So we hope you'll think about who we are, what we represent. We hope you'll look into us. We hope you'll look at our website. Ken.
The closing words were written by Peter Bell, who was at one time the president of CARE USA, also a lifelong UU. Mrs. Okajima, my Japanese mother when I was an exchange student in Tokyo in 1957, wrote poetry, arranged flowers, and carved beautiful wooden trays. She had written her life's motto in beautiful calligraphy on a scroll: to make the world more wonderful. A couple of years later, when I was a student at Yale, I took a metaphysics course with Professor Paul Weiss, who had lost relatives in the Holocaust. In our last class, he ushered us out with the instruction: go forth and make the world less miserable. Ever since, on my good days, I think of Mrs. Okajima, and on my less good days, I think of Professor Weiss. May we think of them too, and go forth to make the world both less miserable and more wonderful. I'm going to extinguish the chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
The postlude is a piano solo by Teddy Wilson, his own composition, Sunny Morning. We now have just an open conversation, but I'd ask you if you would to use, there's a button at the bottom of the screen that says reactions, and part of it says raise hand. And if you click on raise hand, then there's a little yellow hand that shows up in your window. And not only that, but your window is brought to the beginning of the line. So someone like me who's trying to keep things orderly can see who raised their hand first, and I can call on people in the proper order. But we have no agenda. We talk about anything, whatever you'd like to talk about. Joyce Francis just went jumping to the front of the line. I don't see a hand, but does that mean you want to talk? Oh, there's Karen Brown. She has a hand. Karen, go ahead. Please unmute yourself.
I really appreciated the point you made about, I mean, the whole sermon was beautiful, and Reverend Trudeau, your singing is so lovely and sweet. This whole service is just terrific. Thank you. My internet connection disconnected, so I'm now on my hotspot, so I missed some of it, but I got the bulk of it. Ken, I wanted to say I really appreciated the point you made about humility and the word wasn't dogma. Was it tenets? No. That the idea that we don't have a doctrine, what you said. And that is a form of humility, because that's humility before the awesomeness of the universe and the great mystery. And that's just a beautiful point. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Joyce Francis, I apologize to you. I couldn't actually see your hand. Your hand was there, but it was right in front of your bookcase and it blended in. So please unmute yourself and forgive me.
That's fine. It's actually in front of a sculpture from Africa. I agree with Karen that I appreciated those 3 points, and particularly the last one. But my fear is that that's what's changing at the UUA, is that we've discovered a doctrine, a dogma that's entitled white supremacy culture eradication. And that's the concern I have with the General Assembly, and the concern I have within our own fellowship that we're battling at the moment. So I appreciate those 3 thoughts. And I don't know if you all are familiar with it. I think it's 2012. What was his name? The big speech at the GA, the invitational big grand speech, was a gentleman who spoke about 3 characteristics of the UUA that we need to change in order to attract new people, particularly people of color, to the fellowship. We have to quit being so individualistic. We have to quit thinking we're unique, and we have to quit fighting authority, which is interesting.
Lord.
And
Frederick Muir.
Frederick Muir, yes.
Fred Muir, yeah.
What's the big lecture called? The
Plenary.
fancy,
The plenary.
the plenary. Anyway, so I
Their lecture.
yes, the Weir lecture. So I appreciated these three characteristics that you wanted to bring out, which I think are more appropriate for us. Thank you. I appreciate that. And one last question. I'm creating a course for our fellowship on the history of dissent within the UUA. We'll see if it gets past scrutiny. But what I'm really missing is how and why the UUMUAC is no longer welcome at the GA. So if anybody can give me that history, any kind of documentation, I'd love to have it. Thank you.
I know a little bit. I know that at the 2020 General Assembly, that was a virtual General Assembly, that UUMUAC had paid to have a booth in the virtual exhibit hall. And less than 2 days before we were to present that, we got a letter saying that we were now excluded and our money would be refunded. And
does
what-
anybody have that letter? Can I
Well,
get a copy of that letter?
I have that letter. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm going to give you my email and I want you to send it to me.
Okay, I will.
Thank you.
And we think what happened was that people behind the scenes sent emails to people at the UUA saying that we were a bad organization, but we were never given a hearing. We were never given an explanation or a hearing. And then,
So-
in 2021, we also tried to purchase space at the virtual General Assembly, and we were just told flat out that we would not be allowed to do so. But no reason was given. No reason was given.
Okay. Any documentation I would like to include in my class. Thank you.
Mhm.
I'll send you my email.
Okay.
Yeah, I could answer a little bit more on that. There appears to be a group that some people have associated with the UU Black Lives Matter group, or maybe it's just critical race theory people who just can't tolerate any critiques of their approach. And Finley Campbell is very open about saying that he doesn't agree with the traditional approach. In fact, he sometimes uses the word neo-racism and whatnot. It's like John McWhorter and others. And certain people are basically saying that you can't critique us. And they start taking actions. They hear about a group like us and they start complaining to certain officials and making accusations and things like that. And it's similar to what happens on some of the campuses where some people will hear something and decide that's not acceptable, and they'll take an action of cancel culture by gathering kind of a mob together. Or in this case it might just be a small group of people on email. They get several people together to make some accusations, and there's no legal process or anything, even moral process to answer those.
Thank you.
Now, Dick, you had your hand up
Yeah,
for another reason. Go ahead.
yeah. My other reason is I really love the point on humility, and that also, I guess, already been hinted that goes in very closely with what's going on with the UUA right now. For example, the public face of critical race theory these days is Robin DiAngelo with her book White Fragility. And the UUA published that and strongly promoted that and strongly promoted her. And it's become very controversial. And at one point I was reading her book, and what struck me more than anything else was her sense of superiority. Even though she was complaining about racism and white supremacy. Even when she was complaining about white supremacy and she's white, she wasn't defending the doctrine of white supremacy. But she was acting in a very, very, what I would call arrogant and superior kind of way. Like if she acknowledged her anti-Black racism and confessed, she was somehow a superior person. It was like a Catholic kind of thing. You confess your sins, and that suddenly makes you morally okay, no matter what you did.
Yeah.
And that I found that so repugnant for me, a lifelong Unitarian like myself, to think you can become superior by confessing some sins and not actually digging into the issues and working for justice. Like I work with UU's for Just Economic Community. And it's a life, like you said, it's a lifelong process. It's never finished, like Niebuhr said. We were doing for the generations. And this attitude is not just from Robin DiAngelo. It seems to be pervading a lot of younger ministers who come out of the seminaries these days. And it relates to belief in these doctrines that you find in Robin DiAngelo, and it goes way back to 20 years ago more. Some of you may have read this book by David Reich, Editor to the Usual World, over 20 years ago, and the struggles he went through with a lot of the same doctrines. Maybe they didn't call it white fragility then, but the doctrines were the same. And we have people dealing with those things. It's nothing new. It's just somehow finally blown up into the public arena.
Finley, I think you're next.
Well, the Phifer, as you, I'm just getting to know you, and I really was very well involved with it, hearing your powerful words, this image of the universe and its incredible complexity. It's just right down my alley. 3 comments. I'm a member of a small group of people who are followers of a famous, infamous paleontologist, evolutionary guy by the name of Teilhard de Chardin, who is the one who argues there's a teleological dimension to all of this and complexity that you described. And I must say this very humbly, humanity is the peak of creation. That we are, all of this stuff came together, consciousness within particles themselves, finally coming to fruition in the human mind. And we have models and avatars along the way that show what this could look like. Of course, one of my favorites is Jesus. But also I see secular forms of that power, this evolutionary power, this teleological power that is hit once we can get past this period of human history and reach the period of the beloved community, like Karl Marx once said, we will then be transformed, going from necessity to freedom. Or as the book of Revelation says, behold, I see a new heaven and a new earth. May we combine the two together and dream of the classless society that we code the beloved community. I just came across a book called Homo Deus, which argues that humanity has reached a point where it actually can shape evolution, can make things go forward, and that progress might come back as a potential of human destiny, as we would say. But unfortunately, we are trapped in a particular system, predatory greed, capitalism, imperialism, call it what you will, that is kind of holding us back. And yet there's that energy that Paul describes as a new world straining to be born, but not quite yet reaching the proper fruition. So I just thought I'd add that part. And then just real quick, the Stalin-Hitler analogy is always complicated for us Marxist, Leninist, historical theists. All I can argue in that is say, yes, you're correct. There was terror, cruelty that the two sides committed. Many innocent people died, and Hitler and Stalin are sometimes lumped together. But as Hobbes said, there's a quality in the human mind that can make a judgment call that can see differences in things that look alike. And in the case of Stalin, he eventually, shall we say, became an ally to the good, And we must always remember that whatever we have in the United Nations came from his decision that the Soviet Union would join in trying to remake a new world where such evils would no longer exist. So I thought I'd just add that part to the discussion. And David Schwartz, by the way, Reverend David Schwartz, getting back to our friend who asked the question, he was my minister. Very bad man morally. He would always go behind our back to try to prevent UUMUAC from moving forward. He was very much committed to Black Lives Matter. And once a decision was made that multiracial unity was a no-no, he saw it as divisive, he went on a crusade to try to discredit UUMUAC by discrediting me. And he gave the impression that UUMUAC was a cult organization that I controlled with my conspiracy theories when I argued that the Black Power movement was deliberately created to destroy the integration movement. And in this case, he was backed by another very powerful figure in Chicago, Reverend Allen Taylor of Unity Temple, who said very point blank that we need to get the Campbells out of UUism. So it was, for him, it was personal, but more political and ideological. And we do have a lot of paper where we can send you, and we have one of our secretaries, her name is Marie Cobbs. She's in on a lot of these documents. We ought to make them available to people so they can see just how immoral these people behave in their efforts to put out the fires of multiracial unity.
John Cohane. Oops, you're muted, John. I can't hear you, John.
Finley and I were probably active in the same church in Chicago, First Unitarian down there in Hyde Park. And I left in about 1970 when this same kind of stuff came up with the Black and Whites Together versus the Black Affairs Council. And you know, if you haven't read it, The Premise and the Promise, which is a book by a guy named Warren Ross, that is a very good history that gets into that stuff. But I was just putting a little something about Frederick Muir on here because his ministry was pretty successful in Annapolis to decreasing the number of members by 32%, I guess, in about 12 years. So he is a real prophet of decline. And if you look at many of these churches, I happen to have the last printed directory from 2009, which I assume is 2008 information. And I go between that and the UUA find a congregation and look at what the numbers are now. This stuff is not working, folks. This stuff out of Susan Frederick Gray and UUA headquarters is not successful. Not only is it not good, but it doesn't market very well. And if you look at some of those numbers, you'll see that. I mean, we're having lots of decline. And the first GA I ever went to was probably before you guys went to GA, which was 1961. And some of us took off classes from Meadville to go to Boston. And one of our group I thought was a wet blanket when he said, and I was so excited about this merger. He said, when there's decay, there's merger. And when there's energy, there's schism. I thought, what the heck is this guy, a wet blanket? But I'm not worried about schism. I'm worried about lack of energy. And I don't think these guys at UUA like Frederick Muir, you can find what he said probably if you go to UU World and put in his name, no K on the end, MUIR. I've got it in the chat, okay? And I've got the Annapolis numbers from 2008 and 2021. And he has been minister most of that time. And he's not a roaring success.
Thank you.
And you mentioned, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
mentioned in the chat his only UU group within 25 miles.
Yeah,
25 miles
because
of what?
of Annapolis, Maryland. If you
Of
put in
Annapolis.
UUA find a congregation, that's all you have to put in to get to find a congregation. UUA find a congregation, put in Annapolis, and then start, maybe the default is 25 miles, work your way up to 30. See how many there are within 30 miles. I don't know what they are because I haven't won all the defaults, but you do UUA find a congregation and you're going to find within that distance of it. You can do it by whole state if you want.
Thank you.
Mhm. Now, Finley, your hand is still up. Is it because you have more to say or you just didn't put your hand down?
Finley and I met when I was doing a biography of Paul Douglas, and we met I met him at First Unitarian, actually, after I'd moved.
Mhm.
And I was back in town.
Mhm. Karen, your hand is up again. Please unmute.
Yeah. And I'm going to take down my hand because I forgot to do that before.
Where'd she go?
I'm trying to read the Commission on Institutional Change report called Widening the Circle of Concern,
Yes.
which provides the roadmap that the UUA has adopted for the next little while, and that has not really been discussed. And it's very hard reading. It's very hard for me to like spit out what it says. But one of the key things is that it keeps talking about creating a new theology, and it should have tenets to provide cohesiveness and guidance for how to live our lives and achieve. And the new theology, we need to provide resources to BIPOC people who have great wisdom because they have survived years of oppression, and they have the great wisdom to create new theologies and practices to guide us into the future, to serve the people of the future. And the whole orientation, they're talking about tenets and new theology, and that we need to be guided and directed to how to make decisions and things like that. So anyway, the business about doctrine and respect is huge in that for me.
Mhm. Yes. Yeah. Alana, your hand is up.
Yeah, so Craig Morrow sent me a document. It was that report, and I read the report, and I had to like read every other line over and over again in order to like really grasp everything they were saying, because they were like all over the place. And there's a readability scale, and I don't know the numbers, and I don't remember any of that. But what it turned out is, in order to really understand that document, you had to have like a postgraduate degree in linguistics. I mean, that's part of that sort of, I don't think I should use that word here, but mind something that a lot of these people confusing. The postmodern thing is about confusion and not being able to really understand. Then you feel stupid. And so you go along, oh, okay, well, they must know more than I do. So I found that document really impossible to agree with or disagree with, because it didn't really make any sense to a normal person, of which I am one. Thank you.
Dick.
Yeah, about that widening the circle, I did read that and review it, and since I do a lot of reading, have a PhD, I probably was better equipped to understand than most people. But what really struck me is that, because I studied some critical race theory already by that point. I read like Robin DiAngelo, some other books on that, and even a little textbook on it. And I thought, wow, this is all about critical race theory. It's using the language of critical race theory. Everything here is about critical race theory, but never mentions the word critical race theory. And so you talk about like theology. What kind of theology are they talking about? Well, if you study critical race theory, you'll learn about that theology. It's not something they're going to create. It's already there, actually. But you don't know what it is. They're not telling you what it is because they're trying to hide critical race theory sort of behind the scenes. And that's one thing that also has always really bothered me about this is they're teaching something, but they're not proud of what they're teaching. They're hiding a lot of the doctrines, and they're sort of hinting at them. And to actually see what the doctrines are or the dogmas from a religious point of view, you have to actually read Robin DiAngelo. And there was this book by Charles Mills I read, and there were several other things like that I started reading. And then I started seeing some of these things. But if I hadn't actually read those things, there would have just been some sort of feel-good kinds of words. You think, well, what's it mean? What's wrong with that? But then they have very specific meanings in their minds. They know what they're talking about, but the general public doesn't. And that's the real danger here. But we're seeing this, for example, in the eighth principle. The wording of the proposed eighth principle is based on critical race theory, on terminology and doctrines, but they don't tell you these things unless you can find it in some footnote here or there. But if it's passed, they'll know what it means to them, and they'll say, well, it's right here. And the rest of us say, well, I didn't understand this well, man. You see, it's a real big issue here.
Yeah. Teresa.
Oh, sorry, wrong button. Hi, I'm Teresa Goodell, first time attendee. So I'd like to agree with what Alana Graham said, but I also would like to say that I too have a PhD and I still don't understand what they're saying. I think that is true. There is purposeful obfuscation there. And one more comment is, love the idea of talking about humility. I think the sermon was great. And I wonder if part of us being a group who approaches our work with humility would include making sure that we allow any person of color, any BIPOC person, to speak before the rest of us. Just a suggestion.
Thank you. Paul.
Yeah, hi. I'm also fairly new to this group. It's my first time attending. I just wanted to say what it was about. I've joined the Fifth Principle Project, and I've read several of the books, so I think I'm up to speed to some extent. I just wanted to comment on the Widening the Circle book as well. I don't know if it was Richard that wrote a review of it that said you read it two times.
Yes.
Lately, and even before you could really fully tease out what they were saying. And I totally understand that. I'm only about 40% done. And it's not like you need a PhD. I mean, I got one too, but it's poorly written. It's just not laid out well. Is extremely general in some places where you have to read it multiple times to get what they're saying. But every so often in the book, I recognize certain key phrases, like there's this thing about certain actions that are acting white. Attention to detail, timeliness. It was just a whole list of them that came out of this one book that people refer to. So every so often, there's keywords there that clearly they're taking their ideas from. But in many other places, I just find it very, very impenetrable. It's so vague in so many places. I can't quite exactly get at what they're trying to say. There's some kind of code being exchanged here. But anyway, I'm going to finish the book. I think you were right when you wrote the review that you really should read it if you've read all these criticisms. So I think it is worth reading just to get your own particular view. But
Thank you. Finley, your hand is still up.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Coming back in. Just wanted to make a comment about this process by which we want to show our anti-racist and multiracial solidarity with people of color. UUMUAC is in an odd position. People know, why did they condemn you, or why did they don't want you to be around? Well, that's because we are dissidents, and when you're dissident, you're dissident. Frankly, we are into equity. We're very heavy into the equity side of this equation. The word equity does appear in the opposition, but for us, it's a real word. So trying to privilege one race over the other race is just another way by which we play into their hands. I experienced the Black Power movement. I experienced going to meetings where the whites were not supposed to speak because they had all of this white privilege and they had to keep quiet while a bunch of crazy stuff was mentioned by these Black Power fraudulents, I'll call them. And pretty soon I had to be the white person in the room.
Oh.
I had to become the white person. Somebody was going on and on about white men did this and how they did all of this. So I gave a whole talk at a meeting. I said, well, as a white person, I had to put on my white hat to go to these people. So no. Everybody gets a chance. Whoever holds up their hands first gets to speak. Equity, I'm sorry, we don't privilege race. Whether it's black privilege or white privilege, it's privileging. And that gets placed into their hands. Black folks got enough intelligence, strength, and energy. Ask Marie Kopp, if they want to speak, they'll speak. If they don't want to speak, they won't speak. Don't need to step aside. Finally, let me talk about this for a quick minute. Right now, there's a group of young black, I'll give their name, African-American young people in their 30s, got $10,000 from the University of Chicago to run a health fair. And guess what is their ideology? COVID vaccination is an attempt to kill black people.
Mm.
They will not allow any COVID vax materials at this health fair. They will not encourage anyone to get vaccinated. And yet they got a $10,000 grant from the University of Chicago. It's a group called, like, are you listening? Powerful Youth, Black Youth. Oh, and they were very part of an integrated struggle, a multiracial struggle to integrate the trauma, to create a trauma center at the University of Chicago. But then the Black Lives Matter thing came along. They dropped out of that movement and now they're from their own black group and they're preaching that doctrine that if you get a vaccine, you're killing black people. So gotta be careful with this question of whether your color or your history of oppression give you any special truth or wisdom. And not always the case. Thank you.
Yeah. John.
Oh, I just put a lot of things in the chat. You know, I live in Austin, and in Austin, Texas, there was someone named Sarah Sachko who was minister for about a month or two in Wildflower Church here in Austin, and there was at least one group that got themselves out when she came, and there was another group of people that she apparently alienated and left after she came. So, but you know, I was by the grocery store 5 miles away from where we live, and we just picked up groceries, and by gum, I think she's living in Austin, but she's telecommuting and preaching in places like Alaska.
But she I'm sorry to interrupt, but she left that church in December of that year. I saw a bio of her because she wrote some really nasty stuff on Facebook.
I thought she left in about September.
Well, it wasn't long after she arrived. I remember.
No, I mean, she came about May or June, probably June, right, and was gone.
Okay, but it was very soon after she arrived.
1 or 2 months. I mean, it was not long.
Right.
Yeah. Marie.
I thought tonight I would just do a lot of listening, but I have to endorse or agree wholeheartedly with what Finley said. One of the things about the group at the University of Chicago, my understanding is that when they applied, they were talking about, addressing the violence that's happening in Chicago. I think that was the reason that they were given the grant. I just want to speak to, you know, the idea of having, you know, Black people speak. The thing is that it all depends on what you will have to say. Because you know, several years ago, UUMUAC, they did allow UUMUAC to do a workshop at the Mid-America. And what happened was that some of the Black Lives of UU came to the workshop and said we had done a lot of bad things. And the leadership wanted to sanction us. But luckily, a number of people had come to that workshop, and they were the ones, I mean, the people who, they were not Black, the majority, of course, were not Black people at the workshop. And those were the people who who had the leadership back down from saying that we had hurt people. And I could mention other things that has happened to me. The Black Lives of UU got a grant to have more Black people come to the GA. And I had, that same year, I had gone to one of the Black Lives Conference convening. And I explained at that there are a lot of things that the Black Lives Matter were talking about, I didn't agree. But I did apply for the grant. And it wasn't Lisa. Her name slips my mind, but she is now on the board of UU. She told me, I spoke to her, and she said that I was being disingenuous because I am applying for a grant for Black UUs, but I don't agree with their position. So the whole point is it depends on what people of color or Blacks have to say that they want you to say something. In fact, at that particular Black convening, they had separated, you know, they were separating the groups, and they had all Blacks and all whites. And I said, where are the people of color? Who are the multiracial people? And when I asked that, about 30 or 40 people came to that group that, you know, that I had, you know, was instrumental in getting the group together at this convening. So I can only say, it all depends on what you have to say, being Black or people of color, that they're going to allow you to speak.
Thank you. Dick?
Yeah, I think what Marie brought up and some of the others hasn't been mentioned. This idea of being a white ally to people of color. It's a key doctrine of critical race theory, being a white ally. And it sounds really good, being a white ally, and I would judge myself to be an ally in an informal sense of all kinds of people of color, struggling people. But as Marie said, in practice, being an ally, a white ally of a person of color,